Welcome back, everyone. We are monitoring the whereabouts of Joe Biden, the First Lady, in Romania earlier on, heading to Slovakia. She's been meeting with a number of Ukrainian refugees, not exclusively those, but also taking in Slovakia as well. A lot of leaders from neighboring countries have already gone into Ukraine themselves and again, shown their support for President Zelensky. The First Lady doing the same right now as she meets with those directly impacted by this ongoing war. And it could be a very long war at that, and it could be agitated depending on how you see things sorting out after Victory Day is celebrated in Russia, heralding the then Soviet Union's victory over the Nazis back in 1945. General Jack Keane joins us right now. The general, also a very, very good student of military history, to say nothing of general history. Significant day for Russians, General. So I'm wondering, if you're Vladimir Putin, how do you leverage it? Do you leverage it? Do you remind folks about it?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think he's going to try to attempt to claim some victories here also as it pertains to Ukraine. I think what's particularly significant is General Gerasimov, who is his #1 top general in his military and who's been with him for years and was in charge during the initial incursion into Ukraine and also into Syria, and is highly respected in the Russian military, was down at the tactical level in the vicinity of Izum last weekend. So I think he has a sense, one would think, of what the limitations are that the Russian military has and the advantages that are being displayed right in front of their eyes that the Ukrainians have at the moment. I will provide an editorial comment here. One of the many systemic problems the Russian military has, Neil, is that the generals are inept when it comes to campaign planning. They have put together another campaign plan for the Donbass, which is as bad as the first one, and particularly more aggravating because they had so many advantages. Terrain that they're familiar with, supply lines closer to Russia, a much smaller area with a larger force presence, but many of the same problems because they put together a plan that was attacking on 4 axes. No reason to do that again, but they did it. So here's what I think is facing Putin, which is at the heart of the 9 May celebrations. He would likely claim some victory by politicizing and making some decisions that the Kherson Oblast, translate that to like a province, is now an independent republic. Much as the Luhansk and Donetsk have been, and they have been expanded a little bit by some of the territorial gains, so you would certainly reaffirm that. He would likely claim victory over Mariupol, regardless of what's taken place at the steel plant. And he may also declare Transnistria in Moldova also an independent republic. That's one option he has. And just claim, and that's a minimal option. Another thing is,
but they have to accept
he could really
that,
double
don't they,
down.
General? I'm sorry, sir. They have to accept that, right? And they're not going to do it.
Oh, they won't accept it, Neil. Yeah, they won't accept it. They're fighting back in Kherson as we speak, and at some point in Mariupol, when he puts an opposition forces in there and local government, there'll be resistance there as well. Another option he's got is to sort of double down and say that this is no longer a special military operation. This is a war not only with Ukraine, but with the United States and NATO, which he has been saying in the last few weeks to cover up for his losses in the north. And declare general mobilization to try to get more troops into the fight and raise the alarm in Russia, that there's huge pressure on Russia. Right now his narrative is that Russia's the victim because the U.S. and NATO are pressing them. Listen, there's nothing offensive going on with the United States and NATO as it pertains to Russia. It's only trying to help, as we all know, the Ukrainians defend themselves. The other thing is he could also throw on a table, take the victories he has, which are very limited and certainly far short of what he wanted in terms of the Donbass area, and go to a ceasefire. And that would, whether Zelensky accepts it or not, that's his call. And that would enable Russia to rebuild his forces. We've watched Russia in ceasefires, Neil, and they're pretty much all the same. He uses them to gain positional advantage and rebuild his forces, and he violates every ceasefire he's ever been in. So Zelensky certainly knows all of that. But I think that's some of the things that are facing us. 9 May is a day that is a huge day in Russia. Their #1 day where they celebrate the victory over Nazi Germany 77 years ago, and they suffered, estimated, between 25 and 27 million people killed. That's just staggering to get your head around what they've always dealt with historically.
I'm just wondering, too, if it can work against Putin, right, General? I mean, a Russian seeing that at home, heralding that event, and it's a very prideful event for Russians. That was the making and the beginning of the superpower they were to become. And it was a just cause. You could look back at that and say it was an amazing military turnaround against all odds. They pulled it off. And then they see what's going on in Ukraine. They might just say, this ain't that.
Well, some of that's going to happen gradually, but the majority of the population are still buying the narrative that this is an operation conducted against Nazis inside the Ukraine military who have been committing genocide.
Really?
That narrative is still accepted. Putin's popularity is still in the 80s. It rose from the low 60s to the 80s as a result of the war. Eventually, the population, though, will have a lot more fidelity in terms of what's taking place there, and certainly the missing soldiers that aren't coming home because they left the bodies on the battlefield, and the soldiers that are coming home will certainly take its toll. If anywhere near the numbers are correct, that we're in excess of 20 to 25,000 potential soldiers killed in this war, which is a staggering amount of casualty, exceeds most of the battles the United States has ever been in. That will impact the population, as the Afghanistan war did, and the casualties weren't anywhere near that.
All right, we'll watch closely, General. Thank you very much. General Jack Keane, following all these fast-moving developments, and we'll see how things go on Monday.